All right, I've got Lesia here with me, and we're doing the interview for Me and My Learning. So, yourself and your schooling.
Okay, hi. My name is Lesia.
Ukrainian.
I am Ukrainian, yes. My parents are both immigrants. I was born in Toronto, though, and I was raised in a very Ukrainian traditional household, so that was my first language, and maybe I can make that my first story, learning English.
Okay.
So I was in, I think it was preschool, because both my parents were working. My dad was doing physical labor, and then my mom was working at some bakery. So they had nobody to take care of me, except my aunt. But then she died, and then I was sent to school, and I hated it. I liked it when I was in my Ukrainian little sadochoks. Those are fun. But when I was placed in the English preschools, it was very individualistic, I would say, and compared to the collectivist kind of ideal of the Eastern cultures, it was very different, and I felt very, not disincluded, but not brought in. It wasn't the same treatment, and
So would you say you preferred the collective Yuki one over the?
yes, collective was so much better because it felt like people cared about you. It wasn't, you weren't just another student, and I don't know, they catered to your needs. And I remember when it was grade 1, when I had to first transition into English school. Before that, I had difficulties with the idea that I had to learn English. I felt as if English people should learn Ukrainian just because I was used to people running around me, and I don't know, I guess it was a very egocentric world, as psychology tells you as a little kid. Everything's about you. But I mean, I really hated the idea of having to learn another language and to fit into somebody else's culture because I felt, is it ostracized? What is the, left out? Ostracized or ostracized? Yes. Ostracized. I don't know. Ostracized, yes. And I remember when I got into trouble, I used to tell my, the person that she could go ahead, tattle on my mom, but my mom only spoke Ukrainian, so she wouldn't do anything. And
Back to the thing. Would you say that the more collective learning,
I had a lot of issues changing my way of learning and way of engaging with people by shifting into English.
So, would you say that affected your learning positively or negatively that you had to do this shift? And then, did you find your style of learning in your Ukrainian setting was a lot different than your English setting? Was it the same? Did it take a long time to adjust? How did that work?
I mean, the Ukrainian style, I wasn't really learning yet. It was all preschool, a lot of learning fine motor skills, just kind of learning, being socialized, learning the social world. And it was much different. When I was put into the English world, there were certain subjects that I had to learn, and it kind of prescribed what knowledge was meaningful to me. And it was very different, but I ended up actually doing well. I learned how to read pretty quickly, even though, I guess it was the rebellion, and then realizing that it's kind of, I want to use a fancy word, but obsolete maybe. The rebellion was useless, and I applied myself, and I did well. I would do because Ukrainian, it was a lot about storytelling too, kind of like the indigenous cultures and traditions. So we did a lot of memorization of poems, and that really, really helped with the memorization of, I don't know, different terminology that we use. So things went quickly, and I don't know if I was really learning or if I was memorizing. but it served me well.
Now bringing it back to like kind of like the core theme of like learning as identity, would you find that you had like a kind of like a culture shock going from the Ukrainian to English? Did that affect like your identity? Like, you know, you talk about that a lot of the Ukrainian like learning was through storytelling, much like the Aboriginal. So do you find that when you shifted into the English, where it's not so much that, it's more text based, that really affected you or not?
I mean, for me, it was all all about having the attention on me, and in the Ukrainian way, it was kind of given to you. But in the English, I had to work for it. So by working for it, I read, I did my work, and then I was rewarded for that. So I mean, it at first made me kind of a loner, as most English ESL students are. They can't really communicate and they're by themselves. But if they have that one thing, for me it was school work, anything school-related assignments, which I could excel at, that kind of linked to the bridge between the loner and the community. I don't...
Anyway, so did that. So you're definitely more of an individual learner now, obviously. Right?
Yes, I'm individual.
Yeah.
But I don't know, even when it's individual, you learn more in a collective setting. For me, okay, I can talk about this.
Okay.
I like spending my time with my textbook, making notes, but the things that stick with me, the concepts that stick with me the best, are ones that I can tell other people. It's the little facts that I tell them in my readings that I found interesting. Those are the ones I remember. I remember the little interesting newspaper readings my mom would tell me, like, oh, did you know that grapefruit shouldn't be eaten with particular drugs because it inhibits... Okay, yeah, this is a show that I watched. This is my mom. This was my own. But it inhibits an enzyme that breaks down the drug. So basically, you get overdosed because the enzyme that breaks it down is inhibited by the grapefruit.
Wow.
That's why particular pills, like birth control, for example, they give you too much drugs because they account for the fact that your body is going to break down some of them. The grapefruit, however, breaks down the enzyme and then it stops. You get basically a higher dosage and then you can overdose, which is, I don't know. And it's stuff that I've told people. So I told this fact before. And it just sticks. So that's why I like teaching people, because it helps reinforce my own knowledge. And yeah, it's like that, I think, with everything. People group together with other like-minded people to kind of expand on that knowledge, because by yourself, you can do so much. But when you have somebody that knows what you know already, it gives you room to grow. So that's where the community, I think that's how it's more beneficial than individualistic learning. So things like Interpretive Discussion by Harrington Gordon.
Oh, yes. just doing some name dropping.
Yes. It helps people engage because it takes a step above knowing the content of the particular book, and it brings that together and makes that as the base knowledge, and then you keep climbing that ladder, and it doesn't just end at knowing who's the main character, what's the plot, basic stuff like that, and it brings it to something else and situates it and makes it memorable so you remember it. I don't know.
So kind of talking about that, how you like, like really talking to people, like the small facts. Do you ever have like any teacher in high school that kind of did that and like really affected you? And would you say that like kind of like we're talking about?
It's interesting. My biology teacher actually was very, very crappy. Mind my language. And it was textbook-based learning in that class. My law teacher, however, she went way beyond the book. So I did do the readings and I learned that, but she situated that knowledge. She applied those concepts, similar to like the project we're doing right now. We're applying the concepts from the theoretical book to everyday life situations. And it's doing that connection, bridging those two worlds, connecting learning. Because usually learning is something obsolete, something not really included in our world, even though it is ever present.
Yeah, it's definitely isolated, right?
And it is separated, and I think it's the institution of school that does the separation. But in the same time, the community of learning bridges it back. So the law class, again, having the different case studies, the actual real life situations applied to the particular concepts, i.e. the laws or the sections of the criminal code, it contextualizes it, and that's very important and critical to learning and engaging minds.
Engaging minds. You know, it's really interesting you talk about that. I was talking about my history teacher being like really hands-on, effective. You talk about your law, which is all about social science, but yet you said your biology teacher was crappy. And tying that back into our presentation, that seems to be a common theme that science teachers, even though that's like one of the most engaging things you can do, don't really engage and go right by the textbook, right? So do you think that that is down to something within like the actual field itself, or do you think teachers just aren't as, the science teachers aren't as, I wouldn't want to say enthusiastic, but just aren't as engaging with the material that they can be, and how does that affect learning, right?
I mean, with subjects like science, there's unlimited amount of terminology that you should know, and each subject takes on their own words and gives it a twist. So science teachers are usually preoccupied with memorizing the terminology, and they feel that until the terminology is memorized, you can't have proper discussion. Almost like the reading. The terms are the reading, so you have to get through the terms. However, nobody likes terms, and it's really pushed back. So I feel science teachers have a difficult time getting through the terms, and then it's the saturation point. Nobody wants to know the cool facts because they're done with the names of the certain things. I mean, I know specific enzymes. For example, why the adrenaline medulla produces 80% epinephrine versus 20% norepinephrine, because there's an enzyme called phenyl N-methyl transferase that converts the norepinephrine into epinephrine. Little things like that. I personally like learning it after going through it, but it's very time consuming and very, very demanding. And so science teachers don't understand that they don't have to go through all the facts, while history teachers know they won't be able to cover everything. So they cover what they think is the most engaging, the most critical points, and then they can engage the student.